My sister forced me out of our childhood home 4 days after our mother's funeral, and she never expected what was hiding behind one bedroom wall. I stood in that hallway holding a single suitcase while Rachel changed the locks with hands that would not stop shaking. She would not look at me directly, and that silence told me more than any argument ever could have told me. I remember thinking this house had raised both of us, yet now it felt like a stranger was standing guard at the door. Growing up, that house on Maple Street had been the only place that ever felt completely safe to either of us. Our mother, Diane, had painted every wall herself, choosing colors she said matched our personalities better than any store could match them. Rachel was the older sister, louder and quicker to take charge, while I stayed quiet and learned to notice things nobody else noticed. Every Sunday morning smelled like cinnamon and burnt toast, because Mom insisted on cooking even though she never truly learned how. We fought over the bathroom, over clothes, over attention, but underneath it all we were sisters who genuinely loved each other. Then cancer entered our lives quietly, the way bad news often does, disguised as fatigue that nobody wanted to take seriously. Mom fought for 18 months, and I moved back home to care for her while Rachel visited only on weekends. I learned to manage her medications, her appointments, and her fear, while Rachel managed her own busy schedule from 2 states away. Nobody warned me that caregiving would rewrite parts of my personality, turning me into someone more tired and more patient than before. Mom used to whisper that she was proud of me, and those words became the only fuel I needed to keep going. The night she passed, I was holding her hand, and Rachel was already speeding down the highway from another town completely. I called Rachel at 2 a.m., my voice breaking apart the moment I tried explaining that our mother was finally gone. She arrived 4 hours later, dressed sharply, already discussing funeral logistics before she had even hugged me once properly. I chalked it up to grief, telling myself everyone processes loss differently, some through tears and others through cold, practical action. The funeral was small, quiet, and beautiful, exactly the way Mom always said she wanted her final goodbye to feel. Relatives hugged me tightly, telling me how strong I had been, while Rachel stood slightly apart, scrolling through her phone. I noticed that distance but dismissed it, because grief makes people behave strangely, and I did not want to judge her harshly. 4 days after the funeral, Rachel called a family meeting in the living room where Mom's photographs still lined every shelf. She sat across from me, folded her hands, and said the house needed to be sold immediately for financial reasons. I asked what financial reasons she meant, since Mom had told me years ago the house was fully paid off already. Rachel said Mom had verbally promised her the house long before either of us understood how serious her illness would become. I laughed nervously at first, certain she was joking, because nothing like that had ever been mentioned during Mom's final months. Her face did not change, and that stillness made my stomach drop lower than any argument ever could have dropped it. She said a locksmith was coming Thursday morning, and I needed to have my things packed and removed before then. I reminded her that I had lived here for 18 months, caring for Mom daily while she visited only occasionally on weekends. Rachel snapped back that caregiving did not equal ownership, and legal documents mattered more than exhausted late-night promises whispered between mother and daughter. I asked to see these legal documents, and she said her lawyer was still finalizing paperwork that would explain everything eventually. That word, eventually, felt like a locked door slamming shut on every question I still desperately needed answered immediately. I spent that night sitting on the porch steps, staring at stars Mom used to point out during summer evenings long ago. The house creaked around me the way it always had, but now those familiar sounds felt like a countdown toward losing everything. I called our Aunt Carol, hoping she might know something about Mom's actual wishes regarding the house and our shared inheritance. Carol sounded surprised, saying Mom had mentioned dividing things equally, never once suggesting Rachel deserved the house entirely by herself. That contradiction planted a small, sharp seed of suspicion that I could not shake loose no matter how hard I tried. The next morning, Rachel arrived with moving boxes stacked in her trunk, ready to help me pack whether I wanted help or not. She moved briskly through my old bedroom, pulling clothes from drawers, avoiding eye contact whenever our hands accidentally brushed together. I asked again about the will, and she said lawyers needed time, though her eyes flickered toward the hallway nervously. That flicker was small, almost invisible, but 18 months of caregiving had taught me to notice tiny, meaningful details instantly. I decided to slow down my packing, quietly watching where Rachel walked and which rooms she avoided entering completely. She avoided Mom's old sewing room, the smallest bedroom at the end of the hallway, more than any other space. I remembered that room had been sealed off years ago after water damage, and Mom always called it unfinished business. Curiosity mixed with grief inside me, creating a strange determination to understand what Rachel seemed so desperate to control. That evening, while Rachel left to handle paperwork, I quietly walked toward the sewing room with my heart pounding loudly. The door stuck slightly, swollen from old humidity, but it finally opened after one firm push against the frame. Inside, dust covered everything, sheets draped over furniture like ghosts waiting patiently for someone to finally remember them again. I noticed one wall looked slightly different, the paint texture uneven compared to the smooth surfaces surrounding every other corner. Mom used to say this room held secrets, though I always assumed she meant old fabric patterns and forgotten sewing supplies. I ran my fingers along that uneven wall, feeling a slight hollow sound whenever my knuckles tapped against certain sections. My pulse quickened as memories surfaced of Mom mentioning a hidden compartment, something she called her insurance policy years earlier. I had dismissed that comment back then, assuming it was simply an old joke about protecting sentimental family keepsakes forever. Now, standing alone in that dusty room, the joke felt like something far more important than I had originally imagined. I pressed harder against the wall, and a small section shifted slightly, revealing a thin seam hidden beneath old wallpaper. My hands trembled as I peeled back layers of wallpaper Mom had clearly applied herself many years before her diagnosis. Behind the wallpaper sat a small wooden panel, slightly warped, secured only by two rusted hinges barely holding together. I pulled the panel open carefully, unsure whether I was ready to discover whatever secret Mom had hidden inside completely. Inside the hollow space sat a metal box, dust-covered but intact, exactly the kind Mom always used for important documents. My heart pounded loudly as I lifted the box out, feeling its unexpected weight settle heavily against my trembling hands. I sat down on the dusty floor, box resting on my lap, unsure whether opening it would help me or hurt me. Outside, headlights swept across the driveway, meaning Rachel had returned earlier than expected from whatever meeting she claimed to attend. I quickly hid the box inside my jacket, heart racing, praying she would not notice my flushed and guilty expression. Rachel walked inside, glancing at me suspiciously, asking why I looked so pale and why my hands were shaking slightly. I told her I was simply tired from packing, and she seemed to accept that excuse without questioning it further tonight. That night, alone in my room, I finally opened the metal box beneath a single dim lamp casting long shadows. Inside were folded documents, old photographs, and a sealed envelope with my name written in Mom's familiar, careful handwriting. My hands shook as I opened the envelope first, unsure whether I truly wanted to know its contents completely. The letter began with words that stopped my breathing entirely, words that changed everything I thought I understood about my family. Mom wrote that she suspected Rachel might try something dishonest once she was gone, and she wanted me prepared beforehand. She explained that the official will filed with her lawyer intentionally left the House division vague to protect certain hidden truths. Attached to the letter was a second, notarized document, one Rachel apparently did not know still legally existed anywhere. The second will clearly stated the house should be divided equally between Rachel and me, with no exceptions whatsoever mentioned. Mom had also included copies of financial statements showing Rachel had already borrowed significant money against the house years earlier. My stomach twisted painfully, realizing Rachel's sudden urgency to sell likely connected directly to debts she had never once mentioned. I kept reading, discovering Mom had documented several private conversations where Rachel pressured her into signing certain confusing financial papers. Mom wrote that she eventually stopped signing anything without me present, growing suspicious of Rachel's increasingly aggressive financial requests. That explained the tension I sometimes noticed between them during my mother's final year, tension I never fully understood before. I sat there for hours, reading everything twice, feeling both betrayed and strangely validated by my mother's careful foresight. Mom had trusted me enough to hide this evidence somewhere Rachel would never think to search during her hurried takeover attempt. I realized this sewing room was never simply unfinished business, but a deliberate hiding place chosen with real intention. The next morning, Rachel acted normal, discussing moving trucks and donation centers as though nothing significant had changed overnight. I decided not to confront her immediately, understanding that surprise and proper preparation mattered more than emotional, impulsive reactions right now. I photographed every document carefully, storing digital copies in 3 separate locations before returning the originals back inside their hiding place. That week, I quietly contacted Mom's original lawyer, explaining what I had discovered and asking whether these documents held legal weight. He confirmed the notarized second will was legitimate, dated after the version Rachel had been referencing throughout her aggressive demands. He explained that Rachel likely did not know this updated version existed, since Mom had filed it independently and privately. Relief washed through me, though it mixed uncomfortably with grief over discovering my sister's true intentions this clearly and painfully. I asked the lawyer how we should proceed, wanting justice without unnecessarily destroying whatever relationship remained between Rachel and myself. He suggested gathering additional evidence first, ensuring our case would be undeniable before confronting Rachel with everything we had found. I began quietly collecting bank statements, text messages, and voicemails that supported Mom's written concerns about Rachel's questionable financial behavior. Meanwhile, Rachel continued pressuring me daily, insisting the locksmith appointment could not be delayed any longer than absolutely necessary. I told her I needed 1 more week, claiming I was struggling emotionally and needed extra time processing everything happening simultaneously. She sighed dramatically but agreed, unaware that extra week would become the most important week of this entire painful situation. I spent those days quietly interviewing family members, gently asking questions about conversations they remembered having with Mom before her passing. Aunt Carol admitted Mom had called her twice, worried and crying, saying Rachel kept asking uncomfortable questions about property value estimates. Our cousin Daniel mentioned Rachel had asked him about mortgage refinancing options months before Mom's health had even seriously declined. Piece by piece, a clearer picture emerged, showing Rachel's financial desperation likely began building long before our mother ever got sick. I felt heartbroken realizing my sister might have been planning this takeover long before grief gave her a convenient excuse. Still, I reminded myself that assumptions were dangerous, and I needed solid proof before making any serious, irreversible accusations publicly. I contacted a forensic accountant recommended by Mom's lawyer, someone experienced with uncovering hidden financial manipulation within family estates. Within days, she confirmed Rachel had taken 2 separate loans against the house, forging Mom's signature on at least 1 document. That confirmation felt like ice water pouring down my spine, transforming suspicion into undeniable, documented, criminal reality overnight. I now understood why Rachel desperately wanted me gone before anyone examined the house's paperwork or financial history closely. Selling quickly would have hidden her forgery, erasing evidence before anyone thought to question the property's confusing financial situation. I met privately with the lawyer again, discussing whether we should pursue legal action or handle things within the family quietly. He explained that forgery was a serious crime and pursuing it properly would require formal legal documentation and eventual court involvement. I asked for time to think, wanting justice for Mom without completely destroying whatever fragile relationship remained between my sister and me. That night, I dreamed about Mom standing in the sewing room, smiling gently, telling me she trusted me to handle everything correctly. I woke up determined, understanding that protecting truth mattered more than protecting comfortable illusions about sisterhood and forgiveness right now. I decided the confrontation needed witnesses, people who loved our mother and deserved to understand exactly what had truly happened. I planned a family gathering, framing it as a memorial dinner honoring Mom 1 month after her sudden and painful passing. Rachel agreed enthusiastically, likely believing this gathering would finally smooth over lingering tension before the house sale moved forward completely. I invited Aunt Carol, Cousin Daniel, our Uncle Frank, and Mom's closest friend, Linda, who had known our family for decades. I also quietly invited the lawyer, introducing him simply as an old family friend attending dinner to honor Mom's memory. The forensic accountant provided printed copies of every document, sealed carefully inside an envelope I planned to reveal at the right moment. The evening of the dinner arrived, and the house looked exactly as Mom would have wanted it, warm and softly lit. Everyone gathered around the dining table, sharing stories about Mom, laughing gently through tears that never seemed to fully disappear. Rachel seemed relaxed for the first time in weeks, believing this dinner signaled the end of our uncomfortable, unresolved family tension. After dessert, I stood up slowly, my hands trembling slightly as I asked everyone for just a few quiet minutes. I explained that Mom had left something important hidden inside the house, something she wanted shared honestly with our entire family. Rachel's expression shifted instantly, confusion mixing with something sharper, something that looked uncomfortably close to genuine fear settling in. I retrieved the metal box from its hiding place, placing it gently on the table in front of everyone present. I opened the sealed envelope, reading Mom's letter aloud, my voice steady despite the emotional weight pressing against my chest. Aunt Carol gasped softly, covering her mouth, while Uncle Frank leaned forward, listening intently to every carefully chosen word. Rachel's face turned pale, her hands gripping the table edge tightly as I continued reading Mom's private, painful concerns aloud. I then presented the notarized second will, explaining clearly that it legally divided the house equally between Rachel and myself. Rachel interrupted, insisting this document meant nothing, claiming Mom had been confused and manipulated during her final, difficult months. I calmly introduced the lawyer, who confirmed publicly that this document was completely legitimate, properly filed, and legally binding. The room fell silent, everyone absorbing the weight of discovering Rachel had been planning this takeover for quite some time. I then revealed the forensic accountant's findings, explaining that Rachel had forged our mother's signature on official loan documents. Gasps filled the room, and Rachel stood abruptly, insisting everyone was misunderstanding a situation that was far more complicated than it seemed. I asked her calmly to explain the forged signature, watching her search desperately for words that never quite arrived properly. Uncle Frank spoke firmly, saying our mother deserved better than being betrayed by someone she trusted completely during her weakest moments. Rachel began crying, admitting she had made mistakes, blaming financial pressure and desperation rather than genuine malicious intentions toward anyone. I told her honestly that desperation never justified forging documents or forcing a grieving sister out of her childhood home. Aunt Carol reached across the table, holding my hand tightly, telling me how proud our mother would have been tonight. Linda, Mom's closest friend, quietly confirmed she had witnessed Mom expressing similar worries about Rachel during private conversations months earlier. The evidence, combined with witness testimony, created an undeniable picture that even Rachel could no longer reasonably deny anymore. I told Rachel I was not trying to destroy her, only trying to protect the truth our mother desperately wanted preserved. She sat back down, sobbing quietly, finally admitting she had panicked after accumulating debts she never told anyone about honestly. I explained that legal consequences would likely follow, since forgery was a serious crime regardless of family relationships involved. The lawyer explained that Mom's estate would now proceed according to the legitimate will, ensuring fair division between both daughters. Rachel would also need to address the forged loan documents separately, facing whatever legal consequences those actions ultimately required. That night ended quietly, with most relatives leaving somberly, processing everything they had just witnessed unfold around that dinner table. I sat alone afterward in the kitchen, staring at Mom's old recipe cards still tucked inside a worn wooden drawer. I felt exhausted, relieved, and heartbroken simultaneously, emotions tangling together in ways I never expected grief and justice to intertwine. Over the following weeks, legal proceedings moved forward, confirming the notarized will and formally addressing Rachel's forged financial documents. Rachel faced serious consequences, including repaying fraudulent loans and navigating potential criminal charges related to signature forgery discovered clearly. I did not celebrate her downfall, understanding that watching my sister suffer consequences brought no genuine happiness, only complicated sadness. I focused instead on restoring the house, repainting rooms, repairing that damaged sewing room wall Mom had once hidden secrets within. I kept Mom's letter framed on my nightstand, reading it occasionally whenever doubt crept into moments of quiet, lonely reflection. Slowly, the house began feeling like home again, filled with new memories layered gently over old, painful family wounds. I invited Aunt Carol over regularly, cooking Sunday breakfasts together, continuing traditions Mom had started decades before either of us existed. Rachel eventually reached out, asking cautiously whether we could talk, acknowledging she understood if I was not ready yet. I agreed to meet her, not because I had forgotten everything, but because Mom always believed in second chances carefully earned. We sat across from each other at a quiet coffee shop, both nervous, both carrying grief neither of us had fully processed. Rachel apologized sincerely, admitting fear and financial desperation had pushed her toward decisions she deeply regretted making so carelessly. I told her honestly that trust would take significant time to rebuild if it could ever be fully rebuilt at all. She nodded, accepting that consequence, saying she understood actions carried weight far beyond simple, convenient verbal apologies afterward. We began slowly rebuilding our relationship, starting with small conversations, gradually working towards something resembling genuine sisterly connection again. I never forgot what happened, but I chose not to let bitterness completely consume the remaining relationship I still valued. Mom's sewing room became my favorite space, transformed into a small reading nook filled with sunlight and gentle memories. I often imagined Mom sitting there, smiling proudly, knowing her carefully hidden truth had ultimately protected both her daughters somehow. Justice had been served not through revenge, but through patience, evidence, and quiet determination to honor our mother properly. The house stood strong around me, holding decades of memories, heartbreak, and now, finally, hard-earned healing and understanding. I realized true strength meant standing firmly for truth, even when truth threatened relationships I desperately wished remained simple forever. Rachel eventually moved into a smaller apartment, working steadily to repay debts while slowly rebuilding genuine trust between us both. We started spending holidays together again, cautiously, carefully, honoring Mom's memory through small traditions neither of us wanted forgotten. I planted flowers outside the sewing room window, choosing the same colors Mom always preferred during warm spring mornings. Sometimes forgiveness does not erase what happened, but it allows space for healing to grow alongside difficult, complicated memories. I learned that grief could reveal hidden truths about people, testing loyalty in ways nobody ever expects during peaceful, ordinary times. Mom's final gift was not the house itself, but the lesson protecting truth mattered more than avoiding uncomfortable family conflict. I kept her letter safe, rereading it whenever I need it, reminding that quiet strength often outweighs loud, desperate, dishonest actions. Years later, I would tell this story carefully, hoping others facing similar betrayal might find courage through patient, determined honesty. The house on Maple Street still stands today, holding both painful history and hopeful new beginnings within its familiar walls. I often sit in that reading nook, remembering Mom's whispered pride, understanding I had finally honored her final hidden wish. Justice arrived quietly, not through anger, but through careful preparation, honest evidence, and unwavering respect for our mother's true intentions. My sister and I are not perfect, but we are slowly rebuilding something honest, something Mom would recognize and appreciate deeply. I no longer fear silence or secrets, understanding that truth, however delayed, eventually finds its way into necessary daylight. Every evening, sunlight passes through that sewing room window, illuminating dust particles like tiny golden reminders of resilience and healing. I think of Mom often, grateful she trusted me enough to protect truth even after she was no longer physically present. This house taught me that family bonds, though sometimes broken, can be carefully repaired through patience, honesty, and genuine accountability. I forgave my sister, not because she deserved automatic forgiveness, but because holding on to anger indefinitely would have hurt me deeply. Mom's hidden letter became more than evidence. It became a lasting reminder that love sometimes requires difficult, protective foresight. I finally understood why she hid that box so carefully, trusting time itself would reveal the truth when necessary. Standing in that restored sewing room today, I feel peace instead of anger, gratitude instead of lingering bitterness completely. This story is not about revenge. It is about protecting truth, honoring memory, and rebuilding family bonds despite painful betrayal. I hope anyone facing similar situations finds courage to search quietly, gather evidence patiently, and trust truth eventually prevailing completely. Mom always said walls hold more than paint and plaster. Sometimes they hold the truth families desperately need uncovering. I closed that chapter of my life not with hatred, but with hard-earned wisdom, quiet strength, and cautious renewed hope. Today, the house feels whole again, filled with laughter, healing, and the enduring legacy of a mother who protected her daughters.